The cognitive dissonance of your average Guardian columnist is a sight to behold. These two pieces were put out on the same day and have totally schizophrenic views of the same phenomena. So this piece was written by Nesrine Malik. If you don't know who Nesrine Malik is, she's a foreign malcontent who was born in Khartoum in Sudan, raised in Kenya, Egypt, and Saudi Arabia, then attended the American University in Cairo and the University of Khartoum, and then moved to London in 2004 to complete postgraduate studies at the University of London, and has ever since been engaged in the enterprise of writing left-wing opinion pieces that call our country racist and try to explain how actually our identity, culture, history, and heritage should include her, despite her having nothing but contempt for our people because of some ancient civilizational post-colonial blood feud or something. Anyway, she's written a piece saying, the result of normalizing reform's ideas, neighbour is turned against neighbour. Always within left-wing thought, baked in, is the premise of the blank slate, the idea that there is such an original position of unity between people no matter their heritage, history, beliefs, religion, national origin, birthplace, accent, identity. All of these things are just sort of cosmetic add-ons, a bit like a skin you might buy in a microtransaction for a video game. These are all customizable, and fundamentally, we all start from being exactly equal and identical, and we all want the same thing. We can all get along. If not for the outside imposition of capitalism, or racism, or populism, or any other such force that seems to have coalesced in the avatar for Nesrine Malik of Nigel Farage and Reform, despite Reform making insistent overtures to the hypothetical moderate Muslim vote, and saying, we don't care about skin colour or sexual orientation or religion, we just care that you get up and go to work and you have your alarm clock set. Anyway, she's written here, turn away for a moment from Westminster and the battle to be the next Prime Minister and towards the lives of the ethnic minorities and immigrants who live in England and who saw many parts of their country turn turquoise at the May local elections. How are these people to be treated by Reform representatives when that party thinks they are lesser humans and a threat to the social fabric of the very communities they live in? No one has said they are lesser humans, besides one rather amusing, now no longer Reform candidate who suggested he melt down Nigerians to fill the potholes. That is not Reform policy, as it turns out. Nevertheless, nobody thinks that they're lesser humans. They just think that they are the bearers of a civilization that we never wanted to import here in the first place. They are reenacting the habits and customs and conditions of their failed foreign countries in our country, often at our expense, because any migrant outside of largely East Asia and the Anglosphere and Western Europe are never net tax contributors. So we're paying to have these people here, turning our home into somewhere unfamiliar, unrecognisable, and they aren't wanted. And so, as a matter of basic national sovereignty, the native population of the country, who have nowhere else to go if this thing fails, should exercise their ability to be discerning and discriminate against people who just don't fit in, who don't pay their share, who commit crimes. Those people should go home, actually. And again, baked into the article's title is the idea of turning neighbour against neighbour. Well, usually these people live in their own sequestered sectarian ethnic enclaves with nothing but antipathy or outright hostility to the native population. They live apart. It's a bit like Disraeli's Two Nations speech, except there's one nation, which is the native British people, and another nation, which is imported immigrant client groups that are weaponized against that native population by politicians and press outlets like The Guardian, in this kind of seething ethnic resentment and an attempt to dispossess them of the only place they can call home. So sorry, I'm going to vote for whichever party promises to reverse that chain of events, to reverse my dispossession and my children's dispossession of the only home we've ever known. And I don't care what names you call me in the process. She starts complaining about all the rhetoric that we might find coarse but amusing in Reform. For example, another Reform candidate tweeted Muslims never coexist with others and should be deported, and that Africans have IQs among the lowest in the world. I mean, unfortunately, that's factual. As for Nigel Farage himself, where does one start? He allegedly sang Hitler Youth songs as a joke, and was allegedly a racist abuser while at school, an admirer of Enoch Powell, a believer in the fact that some Muslims are here to take us over, and a man uncomfortable with people speaking other languages on public transport, who has even blamed traffic congestion on immigration. Sorry, I'm not going to vote for him no matter how hard you try. But that last part, I mean, that's all true. There are some Muslims here who believe that they want to subsume Britain into a caliphate. In fact, more than half of Muslims in Britain believe there should be blasphemy laws around cartoons of their Prophet Muhammad. About a third of them, according to Henry Jackson Society polling, want Islam to be the national religion and for Sharia law to be the law of the land. So yeah, that is a takeover, actually. And then, as far as being uncomfortable with people speaking other languages on public transport and blaming traffic congestion on immigration, if you add millions and millions of people to the population, where do you think they drive? The roads, which are limited in pure space, because you can't build the road space in time to keep up with this level of population surge. And also, there is just a natural ceiling on the amount of space that you can build roads with. Do you think they start flying? Where do you think these people go? If they go on public transport, that means public transport services are increasingly burdened and slowed down. More expensive, especially if they don't pay their fares, as conspicuously the new arrivals don't. And also, yeah, I'm allowed to not want people speaking various languages like we're living in the rubble of the Tower of Babel on public transport or in my own country. Especially because that does erode the social fabric, the ability to have a high-trust society. Because you don't know what the people around you are thinking and saying. It makes them unpredictable. It means that you can't relax. It means you don't know your neighbours. You can't make default assumptions about these people that they are basically like you because you know nothing about them. You don't know what their intentions are towards you, and it just makes everything a hostile environment and an unfamiliar place. Instead, the only reason you're arguing to stigmatize these things is because they benefit you. Because in this article, she then goes on to say, well, sometimes I want to speak another language and not be listened to by white people. And it's like, okay, so you admit that you are basically living in like an ethnic bubble separate to the people whose ancestors built the country and whose largesse you would like to come over and take advantage of while all calling us racist. So you admit that there is a division when foreigners and their children speak other languages, because you exploit and take advantage of that division, but then you're saying that anyone who complains about it is evil and wrong, and this is basically just saying, let me get away with the behaviours that I want that give me power without judging me for it. And sorry, no, I get to judge you for it. I think, as well, you're worried that people judge you for it, because the majority opinion is that we don't have to put up with this anymore. Anyway, she says, this sort of speech has become background noise, hasn't it? Just part of the general political slop of the decade since Brexit. Take back control, stop the boat, secure our borders. It is true that there is such a thing as slopulism. As Dr. Parvini says, slogans such as this that use our anger to reroute it to their agenda, basically co-opting public discontent and funneling it into a containment mechanism that is essentially the establishment with anti-establishment branding that never does anything substantive to change the system, to reverse mass migration, to regain us our demographic security, and to stop us getting involved in all sorts of conflicts that don't benefit us halfway around the world. But they do shout the slogans and promise to take back control. That is very much the case. But she isn't concerned about that, because she doesn't want any of the substantive goals that Slopulists seize upon and pretend to care about while not actually delivering on. Instead, she cares that people want those goals in the first place. And so she is trying to render radioactive any of this rhetoric because it disadvantages her as a foreigner who doesn't like us very much and has made a living denigrating our culture and calling everyone racist. We're just not having it anymore. Claims that we have become embarrassed about our culture and history. Sorry, I don't think you share a culture and history with me, Nesrine. I mean, you're Sudanese, raised in Kenya, Egypt, and Saudi Arabia. What could we possibly share? You write about Islam favorably. I don't think we have a culture and history in common. There is no we here. Claims that we've become embarrassed about our culture and history because something was not sung at last night at the proms, rows over the university syllabuses that threw black, Asian and minority ethnic students under the bus, nonsense about flags that we are not sufficiently proud of. Okay, are you proud of the English flag? Because it's not your flag. You seem to have nothing but contempt for us. So is it nonsense to say that people are denigrating our national flag? And I really don't like the cycle that this article participates in, which is calling something evil and racist, and when you push back on it, they go, oh, it's not a big deal, why do you care so much, why are you even talking about it, it's not even happening. Well, you're the one dedicating page space in The Guardian to it, so clearly it does matter to you, so if it matters to you, it matters to me too. Anyway, she says, reform policies and talking points have become almost indistinguishable from the swirl of culture war and anti-immigration hysteria that now constitutes our mainstream political culture. You could plausibly have a who said it test between Tory, Reform and Labour and be flummoxed. This is a very interesting point. It is, again, the incorporation of Slopulist talking points by parties that are actually various flavours of establishment. And again, there are good people in Reform. I've even met some good, level Tory staffers who, good luck to them. They want to change the party, but I think again it's a busted flush. Nevertheless, the actual leadership of these parties are comfortable with most of the status quo and only want to save the system from its excesses. And so she's accidentally stumbled upon a truth here, which is they all use the same rhetoric, but fundamentally they're doing pretty much the same thing, which is commitment to a version of Britain where anyone can self-identify as being British, just like Nesrine Malik, despite their obvious contempt for the country. A economic model which has, outsourced our manufacturing capacity and our sense of national and local identity to mass manufacturing and the service economy, while also importing cheap foreign labour from overseas to force all of our own people to compete with the entire world for job opportunities in their own home. She is right in that these slogans are spread like thin gruel across all the parties, but they're actually not offering that much in terms of actual substantive policy differences to one another. She says, in fact, you can even add Tommy Robinson to this mix, whose second Unite the Kingdom rally was held in London at the weekend and who calls for national unity, free speech and Christian values. And again, she's accidentally correct, because Tommy is not that different to Kimmy Badenoch or Nigel Farage, despite them wrinkling their nose at him, because he wants to build a sort of multiracial civic nationalist coalition based around British identity and culture, which boils down to liking the monarchy, the empire, Christianity, being polite and queuing. It's nothing with harder boundaries than that. And again, I'm not insulting anyone that goes to Unite the Kingdom. Just let me reiterate. But what she's stumbling upon here is she has found herself, because she is on the furthest leftward fringe of the country, outside of a very broad consensus on things like British identity, legal migration, economics. And she's going, oh my god, all of these people are engaging in the same rhetoric. Aren't they evil and fascist? And it's like, no, you're a demented communist ideologue. And these people, for some reason, are committed to the health of the organs of the state. But the words that will fill our papers and airwaves have consequences. They shape the beliefs and political views of the people who have, make no mistake, turned against their neighbours and voted Reform. Ethnic minorities know that the election of Reform candidates holds no promise, that things will not get better for them, only worse, that there is nothing at the core of Reform's political project other than identity politics. What a wild accusation. Nesrine Malik, who constantly writes about the poor, oppressed women and minorities and Muslims, there's nothing to her opposition other than identity politics. Again, all politics is identity politics. You just don't like the fact that the English people are gaining salience of their own identity, and they realise they are competing in a zero-sum game for resources and recognition with the faction that you represent, which is hostile, imported, tribal minorities. You just don't want them to gain consciousness of the situation that they currently find themselves in, because it's easier to exploit someone who doesn't know they're being exploited. She says that there is no local economic agenda, no grand vision for supporting people in a cost of living crisis. Reform has promised to cut spending, reject proposals to house asylum seekers in its area, and end any diversity roles in local government. Yeah, that all sounds very sensible, actually. Again, I think Reform are Inadequate as they stand, but all of those things sound very sensible. And they don't sound sensible to you because you are fundamentally against the interests of the native British people. The party will be hampered by central government policy, as any other, and will succeed only in spreading further fear, suspicion, and division. Again, we don't start from a place where we're all holding hands and singing Kumbaya, so your premise is wrong. It will shade national concerns around people coming into the country into local concerns about how ethnic minorities exist in our communities. You keep saying our communities. These communities are apart from each other. They live in sequestered communities hostile to the neighbouring white British ones. And so it's not an our. It is them and us. The division exists naturally as a consequence of bringing these people here. And so now when you're complaining about identity politics and division and hatred, no, this is the natural consequence of having a settled population, having an entirely new people imposed upon it. And they just want to reverse that decision. And they're quite right to. Black and brown neighbours will now be the subject of suspicion, possibly as far as the policing of the very languages they're allowed to speak. Farage has said that the number of students speaking English as a second language in Glasgow was tantamount to the cultural smashing of the city. Yes, correct. You can't have a culture if you don't speak the same language, because you can't understand each other. With regard to the cultural practices and public appearance minorities are allowed to display, lest they diverge from Britishness, Farage has said that immigrants from the West Indies integrated better because they had a shared history, shared culture, and shared religion with the UK. I don't think that's true. I mean, have you seen Notting Hill Carnival? I don't think they really integrated very well at all. They're sort of hacking each other up with machetes at their annual event. They do it regularly. So, no, I don't buy this, like, Windrush revisionism that says, actually, all of the Jamaicans that came over on the HMS Windrush were just wholesome chungus and worked with the NHS. But, it's only been since 1997 or the Boris wave that immigration has been bad. No, it's been since 1948, actually. And the Windrush wasn't invited. They didn't come to rebuild the country after the Second World War. They came because they thought there were job opportunities working for the buses. And it caused a national crisis that led to the catastrophic passage of the British Nationality Act. And then after that, because of the way that subsequent waves of Indian and Pakistani migrants behaved in the 50s and 60s, it led to around 2 decades of net emigration of Brits to places like Australia. On freedom of religion, Farage has called for a ban on the Muslim public prayer, saying the Ramadan event in London earlier this year was an open, deliberate, willful attempt not at the private observance of a different religion, but the attempt to overtake, intimidate, and dominate our way of life. Entirely true, but also the idea that there is such a thing as a public-private distinction is incorrect, because people don't step through the door of their house like it's a magic portal and lose all of their deeply held religious convictions, and compartmentalize them away from how they engage in politics. Like, my Christianity informs my character, the way I treat other people, and the way I interact with political issues, because politics are issues that you can't walk away from, because you have to solve them, otherwise your children will be confronted with the consequences of you not solving them. And the fact that I'm having a family is downstream of my Christian faith. So, the idea that there is such a thing as a public-private distinction is a liberal canard that we just, again, can't afford to indulge in when we have imported much more clannish, much more strong in conviction cultures into our country. Who will be exempt in these circumstances? Who is spared from suspicion? How long do you have to have lived in an area to be allowed to call it home? The black man whose family has been here for generations. The woman in a hijab who has sought asylum. The brown child born in the UK who speaks a language other than English to their friends and family, as I do often, in the sort of public transport conversations that give Farage the creeps. All cast as cultural smashers and forever outsiders, unless they can strip the colour off their skins and self-police their dress, speech and culture. I mean, set the concern of skin colour aside, because that's incidental. Yes, you should self-police your dress, speech and culture, because dress is the external presentation of your beliefs. Speech and language is the foundation of culture. And culture are the bonds of solidarity between individuals and families. And so if you have no shared culture, if you don't speak the same language, if you just dress differently, so you have visual demarcations between peoples on the grounds of belief and culture, then you can't have a coherent civilization. You can't have friends, you can't have neighbours. And also notice how she does a sleight of hand here. This is like reading an article from a tapeworm. Notice how she says, the brown child born in the UK who speaks a language other than English to their friends and family, as I do. It's like, number one, okay, so you are speaking different language on public transport because for some reason you don't want your conversation to be overheard on ethnic grounds, but also, you weren't born here, Nesrine. So you are associating the treatment of someone who was born in Britain, and again, I don't think that's that meaningful a distinction, because if I was born in Sudan, I wouldn't be Sudanese, would I? You're conflating that person with yourself. When you migrated here, despite living in multiple countries and basically having no country to call your own, you are an anywhere person trying to impose an anywhere mould on the vast majority of British native somewhere people. And we're just not having it, I'm afraid. And that's why consciousness is being raised. That's why people are voting for the furthest right available option that they are aware of in increasing numbers. There has been a failure, an inability to grapple with the gravity of what is happening. The anti-migrant right has been given too much space and time by the media and politicians to establish itself as the mainstream. No, it's not because the media is artificially injecting division into people's households. It's because people notice the world on their doorstep changing, and so they have their consciousness raised and get involved in politics of their own volition, via social media, via alternative media, and then that inevitably, through much consternation from the mainstream media who act as gatekeepers, that inevitably seeps through to the mainstream because it gains electoral momentum, and under Ofcom regulations they can't actually ignore it for all that long. So this is an inverted diagnosis of what's happening, because she would like to pretend, or at least perhaps is engaged in motivated reasoning and truly believes, that this is all artificial, that this can just be banned and censored and shunned, and the problem will go away, and we can all return to the settlement of minoritarian grievance that advantages her and her co-ethnics and her co-religionists. And sorry, that's just not going to happen. I mean, people are too pissed off. The problem is too great to be ignored anymore, and it's only going to continue to grow, and this isn't going to win anyone over. She says, so-called legitimate concerns around immigration. She just dismisses the idea there are any legitimate concerns about immigration, which means that immigration should be limitless, should have no quality controls placed on it, there are no concerns about the demographic composition of the country and the possession of said country by its native people, so she just has total contempt for us. Good to know. So-called legitimate concerns around immigration have turned into covers for prejudice. Mentioning the racism that fundamentally defines this metastasizing politics is woke. Agreed. Listen here, Reform will insist. It's about immigration, and no smears or sneers are going to stop us talking about it. I wish they were as based as you said. And so back to Westminster. The real threat is not posed by pretenders to Keir Starmer's leadership. It is a Reform party that is edging further towards taking parliamentary seats at the next election. What is at stake are not political careers, but the safety and dignity of ethnic minorities in the UK, the relegation of neighbours to second-class citizens. Dear God, the British people have been ignored by every political party, despite voting for less migration at every election since 1974. They've received more ever since. They are second-class citizens in their own country, subjected to a two-tier justice system that imprisons them for holding negative opinions of minorities that were imported into the country they never wanted, that commit disproportionate amounts of violent crime, that sponge off their taxes. The entire state and judicial system and police is dedicated to protecting your ethnic group, Nasreen, and others like it from having their feelings hurt. So don't tell me about being relegated to being a second-class citizen. I'm sorry, citizenship means nothing if it is handed out like a participation trophy. You do not have an equal tie to this country to me, because not only have you demonstrated your own personal contempt for it, not only do you want to culturally terraform it, you were not even born here, you have no British ancestry, you don't share its religion, your instincts, your sentiments do not correspond with the thousands of years of continuity we have culturally. And so I'm just not going to take lessons from you. But what I wanted to do is contrast this with a piece that was published on the same day, which is The Guardian saying, actually, inside the beating heart of every Reform voter is a progressive, just waiting, crying to be set free. Do you not see how this just doesn't correspond? We at The Guardian have nothing but seething contempt for Reform UK and the people that are voting to basically put migrants in camps. Oh, but they all secretly want to vote for Zach Polanski. They're all actually Labour voters who are really, socially progressive. Never mind the fact that every social attitude survey we've taken shows that even your average Labour voter is to the right on social issues like the death penalty and migration of your average Tory MP. No, it's all the dispossessed, working class who are actually in favour of trans rights. Just totally delusional. She profiles people that she interviews here. Martin, an ex-miner, and his wife Diane, who works with disabled children until she retired last year, both voted Labour in 2024, which they now regret. They haven't got a clue how we live, says Martin of politicians. Not a clue. Both are appalled by politicians' perks and pay. The £98,000 salary, second jobs and lobbying scandals strengthen their sense that politics is corrupt. And I will say, this is one of the most damaging things for reform. It's this £5 million donation from Christopher Harborne that Nigel now admits to having taken. It's the fact that he spends basically no time in Clacton and does make a lot of money on the side. I don't resent people earning well, but if you're going to be a politician, the entire point is to actually fix problems in the country, not be a carnival barker, and also make a lot of money from media gigs and gold bullion brands and having a cameo on the side. Like this is an issue that does put some people off. It codes as unserious. It codes as Nigel being on the make rather than being dedicated on a one-man crusade to saving the country. The author says they're not alone in this. Political corruption came up frequently in my interviews. Martin is planning to vote reform next time. Diane says she probably won't vote at all, being somewhat sceptical of Farage. He does go on a bit, she says. Martin earned a good salary as a bricklayer down the pit, but he struggled for work when his colliery shut in the late 80s. Eventually, he found work as a gardener, earning about half of what he used to. Actually, sounds like a dream for me. Sounds like what most of my family do. He has remained on low pay ever since. With the rising cost of living, the couple have cut back on luxuries. We only go and see tribute acts now, says Diane. We can't afford proper acts. Martin blames politicians. You are getting poorer, actually. That is what you are getting. Poorer. This is what they want. And he's correct. There's a feeling that nobody is taking their side. Now, he's seemingly willing to vote reform as a protest vote against the establishment. But the diagnosis that Nesrine accidentally stumbled on in the last article is that for all the slogans, is anything substantive going to change? I mean, besides Rob Jemrick mismanaging the economy via keeping the OBR and the Bank of England in place, sure, taxes might be cut under reform. Sure, business rates might get better. Things might be, for a short period of time, easier to pay for, and some illegals might go home. Will legal migration substantively drop? Who knows, because Nigel's already said we haven't taken advantage of India enough. I think 250,000 Indians a year was probably enough for me, thank you very much. Are they going to fundamentally tackle the underlying institutions and assumptions made by the Treasury that have impoverished our economy? I'm not hearing signs of particularly radical thinking out of Richard Tice and Robert Jemrick. So the idea here is that Martin, pseudonymized of course, doesn't feel represented by the politicians. He feels they're in it to get richer, and they're making us poorer. And he's voting reform as a protest vote. He doesn't have particularly sticky loyalties to reform. These people did have sticky loyalties to Labour. They've been obliterated because Labour betrayed the working class and attempted to replace them with Muslims as a client voting bloc. Reform is new, and it is a protest vote. So these people are volatile voters. They're low propensity, even though they're really, really angry. And they're not all that loyal to Farage yet. I mean, his wife doesn't believe in Farage. She might be a reluctant reform voter at the next election because nothing better is on offer, but it is very telling that all of these people are ready and available. And not only is reform not capitalised on all of them, they should be on 40-50%, as Boris Johnson was right before the 2019 election. But also, The Guardian, at the same time, is capable of diagnosing this in one area, while completely misdiagnosing their priorities and thinking they're actually way more progressive than they are, when it's mainly about economic deprivation and dispossession of their country. But on just a page over, apparently these people, this is Martin and his wife, are obsessed with ethnically cleansing their neighbourhood of foreign communities. I mean, they probably do want lots of people to go home. But do you see how this ability to understand what the phenomenon driving support for reform on the right more broadly is? Do you see this inability to empathise with the native people? Because people like Nesrine Malik just they think it's a non-starter position to say the British people have an exclusive claim to their own country, and being deprived of that is a legitimate grievance. So she can't actually understand what's driving the populist insurgency that she actually correctly credits with having slopulist slogans but nothing substantive in terms of policy. To describe the views of Martin, his wife, and others as an amorphous anger is to undersell the coherence of their critique. Their complaints about the government are underpinned by more progressive views on what ordinary people are due and what political representation ought to look like. They're not at all. They are informed by possessive views. Not progressive, possessive. They believe they are British, this is Britain, And so politics should conform to the prejudices, preferences, and expectations they have of their life as British people, which is things shouldn't be too expensive. The government shouldn't be too intrusive. Taxes shouldn't be too burdensome. Things should basically just work. You should be able to trust and know the people around you. People should speak English. They should queue. They should be polite. There shouldn't be random stabbings and men from the Horn of Africa milling about in the middle of my high street every day. So no, they're not progressive at all. They're not for trans rights. They're not for massive wealth redistribution on racial lines. They're not for being demographically swamped by the third world. They're not progressive. They are possessive. And The Guardian cannot comprehend that. Even when talking to these people. They think, for example, rent controls are a good idea, or price controls in supermarkets, which the government have suggested as of today, which is just going to obliterate the economy even more. She says, some of my interviewees will always vote for the right because they hold right-wing views on taxes, benefits, and the state. This is true of many Reform voters. Others were preoccupied with visions of brown men sneaking across the channel to take advantage and do harm. They're not visions, it's just factual. Like the amount of sex crimes that have been in the headlines that we know about over the last few years. It's just intolerable. And I'm sorry, I don't think that this is all the murders and rapes are an acceptable price to pay for living in a multicultural utopia that you have in your head. It's just not going to happen. They spoke at length about dangerous immigrants deliberately shredding their passports. Voters who are invested in such views will not be part of any progressive project worthy of the name. Yet, so they're not progressive. And this is their top issue. Immigration is the top issue of most voters and pretty much all Reform voters, especially Restore voters. So, your diagnosis is completely wrong. This is why there will never be a left-right alliance, because immigration is an unquestionable axiom. It is the pillar of left-wing thought at this point. Like she might say, for example, that she agrees with some of these proposals. A second jobs ban for MPs, replacing the UK's lacklustre lobbying legislation with a new approach to MP salaries. It's entirely reasonable to ask why MPs are still allowed to have second jobs, or why town centres are left to decline, or why life has become so expensive. Very true. But you don't want to address all those things because lots of it is because of the growth of the state and because of immigration. And so you might think that you have economic ideas in common with populist-leaning voters, but the reason they have these economic ideas is because they feel dispossessed of their own country by immigration. It is because they feel the politicians aren't working in their interests, and so they want to preclude politicians from having second jobs, from having lobbyists in their ear, from having unreported stock earnings, which divest a politician's attentions away from the things that they're concerned about, fixing the problems in the country. They want to minimize the ability for a politician to have any outside input or vested interest that stops them from solving the problems they care about most, that stops them from representing them substantively. And so this is why The Guardian can publish these two Jekyll and Hyde pieces, on one hand denouncing Reform voters as vile racists, and on the other denouncing them as Burnham stands in waiting. They just need to be told about the benefits of rent controls and a wealth tax, and then they'll all be voting Green tomorrow. The Guardian can publish both of these pieces because they're desperately coping with the fact that they are on the losing end of the current political dialectic, that they're on the back foot, they're being routed, that most people don't agree with them, and the more people engage with politics, the less relevance they have. And because they aren't willing to question their fundamental moral axioms, they will never understand why political power and popular consent is slipping through their fingers.